The genius in front of you is about to give up 2 weeks of their life to make a game, and absolutely lose their mind. But they don't know that yet. Yeah, I think I'll join this jam. So Piratesoftware is a creator you've probably heard of, and every 6 months they try to convince people to make games in a jam. A game jam, if you will. The jam runs for 2 weeks, and the special thing about this jam is you need to make a game design document with your game. At the time the jam started, I was actually tossing up between 2 different jams. But I decided on the pirate jam because the theme got me a bit more excited. So what is the theme? It's spreading. And I thought, yeah, I reckon I could turn that into a game. For this game jam, I decided it was time to go all out and give up on my social life for the whole 2 weeks and make something I was actually proud of. Not like any of my other interesting games I've submitted to jams in the past. So I thought with any luck and a bit of dedication, this could be the jam I finally bring home a real win. And then I realized there were 9,000 other competent devs who were also entering this competition, and my hope faded a bit. To make sure I could get the best possible project out there, I had to make sure I could actually finish it. And so my idea where you travel across the open world and manage troops to spread the good word of the Communist Manifesto, all to make sure that USSR rules the world, had to be shelved. Maybe next time. For this jam, I was going to focus on our fungal friends who love to get their spores out. I was focusing on mushrooms, and more specifically, killing them. So the actual idea is to go into caves, eliminate mushrooms, and avoid adventurers, because they think you're a monster or something. I will admit I was watching a show called Delicious in Dungeon, which is about people cooking up and eating monsters in dungeons instead of getting the loot, and that may have inspired the idea a teensy tiny bit. And with an idea written down, we can just jump right into development. Have you heard the good word of our Lord and Savior game design documents? Oh, no. What? Just like his YouTube shorts, Thor is using his game jam to make sure you're making games and learning. One way to do this and have the highest chances of actually completing the game is to first make a plan. And the best way to make a plan for a game is with a GDD. If you've never heard of a GDD before, it's not some disease you can get from making too many games. It stands for a game design document, and is just a little document game makers put together before they start to actually make a game so that they stay on track. They can range from a single page to an entire book. I've never made one of these for a game before, but luckily there are templates online to get us started. So after spending a day making and refining the plan for the game, now it's time to jump right into the game. The first thing I worked on was a basic character, just so I had something to look at and to keep inspiring gameplay elements. The first sprites were made in MS Paint because that's what I did all my brainstorming in, and I did think it would be funny if I used it to make all my art. I wanted to create a really completely sunken, devoid of any life cleaner. And he's even got the Minecraft Steve looking fit on. This was super rough at first to see if I could actually get that 2.5D effect I wanted to work. Wait, 2.5D? That doesn't make any sense. You can't have half a dimension. It's 2D sprites in 3D space. This is an effect I've always wanted to try and use, ever since I saw this video about 2 days ago. I'd set up a basic scene and I actually thought it looked good. So before trying to see if the actual gameplay is fun, I reworked all the art. Unfortunately, no longer in MS Paint because I couldn't be bothered bringing them into a separate program just to make them transparent. Look how pretty it is. And instead of actually drawing well, I just made everything dark and scattered some lights. A little trick I picked up from Mr. Game Jam over here. They do actually draw well though, so I just made my game extra dark. And with an aesthetic design, I suppose now I can move on to... The first few days all went to making art. What was the gameplay loop gonna be about again? Only I had a document that outlined exactly what I wanted everything to be and how I wanted it all to work. Oh yeah, yoink. So the first thing I needed to check off the list was making our little spray bottle so that we could actually remove the mushrooms and get cleaning. This was super straightforward. I just made a button next to the player and checked if there was things in that box when the player clicked, and then deleted them if they were a mushroom. And to make it a little cuter, I chucked on a particle effect of some cubes spraying out into space. This is also where I chucked on some animations to the mushrooms, just to bring a little more spring and life into the world. Whew, that was a lot of coding. So to take a break, I drew up a night. And now we have all the members of a game company. The programmers who never go outside, and management. So now we've got an enemy, but we'll give him some AI later because that's not that important. And with like 90% of the gameplay down, I started to make a dungeon to see if it could actually be fun to wander around. And when I started wandering, I realized that there were some walls. And the problem with these walls is they aren't transparent. We could either make it so the player can rotate the camera and then rotate all the items to face the camera, or I could just... So I made them semi-transparent when you're behind them, but you could also potentially see into other rooms, which we'll just have to remember to keep in mind when we're really making the dungeons. Wait, you can just have planes? And they're one-sided and they're better for the game? Oh. Yeah, no, that's cool too, I guess. Yeah. And all that took about a week. And there's still barely any gameplay. But before I started to actually design these dungeons, I decided I needed something to help create an actual story, so we could actually have an ending to our game. Because that's something I've never actually done before. I decided to add 2 different methods of storytelling. One is your employer, who's talking to you between levels and is constantly trying to extort you, so that they don't have to spend much on you. And we also have got these cute, silly little frog guys that hate you because you're destroying their mushrooms that they love. The employer was easy, but to make the frogs, I just stole a dialogue system from online, but because that only worked in 2D, I had to use viewports to put it into 3D, and then spend about a day trying to make it so that if one frog spoke, the other one would shut up. But then the text didn't really fit the style of the game too well, so I tried to make my own font. But that looked even worse. So instead I just lowered the quality of the whole game so you don't notice, which did actually work, having the effect of looking like it was made for the PlayStation. I just had to be extra mindful to make sure everything was readable in the future. Now, after adding these frogs, I actually had an idea. I wanted the game to have some great fungal guy who's been spreading the mushrooms and tries to convince you to swap sides and spread the mushrooms instead. But since I already had the frogs, I decided to make them the people trying to convince you, so that I didn't have to introduce a new character, and so that the frogs actually had a purpose instead of just being angry at you. I also decided it was probably time to give some pathfinding to the knight. It just stays still and then goes towards the player when it gets too close. And if the player needs to get away, maybe the spray can be used for more than just removing mushrooms. And with all the pieces we needed to make the game, it was time to move on to... Now, I've never been the best level designer. I've always relied on infinite space going on forever and ever, or... yeah, it's really just infinite space. But it's time to make some dungeons. I made the first 2 dungeons over about 3 days because I was still experimenting with the mechanics and wanted these 2 to introduce the mechanics to the player, avoiding the knight and spraying mushrooms. Making these 2 levels also taught me that to make future dungeons, I should make some basic components that I mix together. But before chucking these components in a blender, I needed to write up an actual story. I ended up with this little journey with 3 endings, and with all the components, I got the basic shapes down for the rest of the levels in about a day. I tried to make the levels feel tight, to make the players feel trapped and claustrophobic. But this also had the effect of making the movement feel clunky and the players getting lost way too easily. And because I made all these endings, I made some way for the player to make decisions with buttons and reading. So that's basically the level design. I added in some extra mechanics to make the later levels a bit more unique, but you'll just have to play the game to see what they were. This is also where I thought it'd be a good idea to actually make the knights wander around and try and attack the player, so that they're more of a danger than just causing social anxiety by standing next to you and saying nothing. Huh? I didn't say anything. Oh, okay. This was a rushed, botched job done over about a half a day, and it definitely shows. But there's only one day before I submit, and I still had no sound. But you don't need any of that anyway, right? I don't think I've ever put sound in one of my Game Jam games, ever. So with my last day, obviously I was going to compose my own soundtrack from scratch while having no experience. Okay. Yeah, ambient music free. I chose this one because I liked it. It's by this dude called William King, and you should definitely go check them out. And for the sound effects, I used this neat little program that generates them, and my mouth. And with the noises done, my final task was to make a settings menu so that you could turn the noises off, which was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. And finally, I hit publish. That was the whole journey of making my silly little dungeon cleaner game. Go check it out if you thought it looked interesting. It's probably one of the best games I've made for a jam / ever. I'll probably do one more post-jam update based on the feedback I've gotten so far, but maybe I'll do more if it's well received. That's it from me. Go subscribe and like if you got to the end of this video. I plan to do more jams this year, so you should follow along. And join my Discord where I release my stuff earlier, and you can see the games before I make videos on them and see when my videos come out and see when I'm streaming and stuff like that. Okay, bye.